Hey, what is going on, guys? This video today is going to be somewhat of a response video to a topic that was being heavily debated between TSM Myth, who I'm sure most of you guys definitely know, and his viewers during one of his recent live streams. The discussion basically revolved around console versus PC players in competitive Fortnite. Now, I just want to make it clear right now at the very beginning of this video that I have a lot of respect for Myth, and this video is in no way any kind of a personal attack towards him. Am I going to disagree with a lot of the things he said? Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, I also do agree with one of the central points that he's trying to make throughout his arguments. And at the end of the day, he's allowed to have his opinion, and I'm allowed to have my opinion about his opinion. So without further ado, let's get right into this discussion. So just due to potential copyright issues, I'm not going to straight up play the footage of Myth making his statements, and it's also spread over a span of about 15 minutes, so I'll just quote word for word the most important parts. I'll also link in the description below the VOD at the time where he begins the discussion, so if you want to hear it for yourself, you can by clicking on that link. He starts off in response to a viewer asking him his opinion on how console players performed at PAX by saying, quote unquote, if console players are just as good as PC players when it comes to building and skill, why should we have to go up against people that have an auto-aim feature? How is that fair? If console players argue that they could actually keep up with PC, then why in the world should we have to go up against people that have auto-flick and auto-aim? It's not fair at all. Alright, so those are Myth's words exactly straight out of his mouth, and let's break down what I disagree with about this statement and why I think it's just factually untrue at some points. First off, I'm not sure why Myth and a lot of the other top PC streamers use the term auto-aim when referring to Console Fortnite. Unless you're able to find and download some sort of a Fortnite aimbot onto your PS4 or Xbox, no console player actually has auto-aim. It's called aim assist. And calling aim assist auto-aim is pretty blatantly misleading when compared to what the feature actually does. Aim assist is not just going to auto-lock you onto anyone in the general area where you're aiming. What aim assist actually does is it just makes it easier for you to keep your crosshair on and just in general track an enemy once you've initially locked onto them. And I don't know what kind of Console Fortnite Myth is talking about, but I'm pretty darn confident that there's no feature on console that even somewhat resembles what he referred to as auto flick. So if any of you guys out there have unlocked the secret auto flick feature on Console Fortnite, let me know because I sure haven't. Now, getting back to the auto aim section of his response, to further hammer home his opinion, he goes on to say, and if you've watched Summer Skirmish, you've seen some of the insane shotgun and AR flicks that some console players are able to hit. Well, the funny thing about that notion is that flick shots, especially from shotguns, are barely impacted at all by aim assist. That's actually one of the biggest reasons why I personally try to avoid flick shotting as much as possible, because you don't have that extra little accuracy boost from aim assist. So whatever flick shots Myth saw from console players were, in all likelihood, barely impacted at all by the aim assist feature that he's so against. The part of aim assist that Myth should mainly be attacking is actually the mid to long range AR aim assist. Before this was patched a few weeks ago, it was actually incredibly overpowered to constantly un-ADS and re-ADS with your AR in medium range fights. But as you guys probably know by now, this was for the most part patched in a recent update that made aim assist even weaker on console. And to anyone that actually thinks aim assist is an overpowered feature that console players don't necessarily need, then I seriously challenge you to turn it off and try to play a game without it. You'll learn very quickly that it isn't overpowered because it is literally a necessity for Console Fortnite. Due to the limitations of a thumbstick, it simply isn't possible to be consistently accurate without it. So I want to actually provide an answer to Myth's question of why should console players be allowed to use aim assist when going against PC players? And the answer is actually fairly simple. because other than aim assist, PC players have every other advantage in the world when it comes to Fortnite gameplay. Aiming with a mouse is so much easier than aiming with a thumbstick. Building and navigating inventory with a keyboard is so much easier than doing it with a controller. PC has instant editing, while console still doesn't. PC has custom binding, while console still doesn't. Plus, PC Fortnite runs at a higher FPS than any console is even capable of. The list goes on and on and on. The core reason why console players should be allowed to use aim assist against PC players is simply because it levels what is otherwise an incredibly uneven playing field. And even with aim assist, PC still has the distinct advantage. Just because one or two console players had a few high placements at a competitive event that also included PC players doesn't mean it was only because they had aim assist. Now, Myth received a lot of criticism for what he said about Console Fortnite during the stream, so much so he actually decided to make a post on Reddit responding to the hate and attempting to defend his comments. He said, "This is taken largely out of context. Someone asked in my chat if I had a newfound respect for console players after PAX. My response was no, and the reasoning was simply because console players have been performing well before PAX and other events simply because of their ability to auto-lock on players racks them in kills. I'll admit that I didn't know was changed after PAX, but the entire discussion developed into something that people clipped and chopped out of context. But further on, as you guys have seen, I commented on how I don't think PC players should compete with console players and vice versa. Both sides have their reasoning, but my main point was how easy it was for experienced console players to spam aim and have almost their entire crosshair set on the target. Mix that in with bloom-based aiming, and you have a bad mix, especially at further ranges. I think a ton of you here think I'm insanely immature with the things I say, but it's extremely unfair for you to judge me based on single instances where people search for me to say controversial things." Now, I'm going to respectfully disagree with his point that the comments were taken out of context. Like I said at the beginning of this video, every quote I gave was exactly what he said, coming directly from the VOD of his livestream. And this wasn't just one or two random comments, he basically discussed it for about 10 minutes straight on stream, so I'm not really sure what he means by saying this was taken out of context. And I also think it's incredibly fair of him to say that console players have been, quote-unquote, performing well in other events simply because auto-lock racks them in kills. But at the end of the day, he's allowed to have his opinion, and I'm allowed to have mine. However, I do want to spend the rest of this video discussing the point that I do strongly agree with Myth on, and that is the notion that PC and console players should not compete against each other in competitive events. I made a video on my channel about 2 months ago titled "How Epic is Killing Competitive Console Fortnite," and that video basically brought attention to the major problem of keyboard and mouse being allowed on Console Fortnite and the negative effects that would have on the whole competitive scene. Think of this discussion as a follow-up to that, and a problem that I think would really hurt competitive Fortnite as a whole for all of the platforms involved. We have seen multiple times that Epic is trying to maintain the idea that Fortnite is an equal playing field on all platforms. You see it when it comes to things like solo showdown being separated by region instead of by platform, as well as fall and summer skirmish using private lobbies containing both PC and console players at the same time. But it's just a matter of fact that console Fortnite and PC Fortnite are in some ways almost like entirely different games. And as Myth touched on in his response, there are definitely valid arguments from both sides as to why console and PC players should be separated at a competitive level. For example, if you're a console player, it's definitely unfair for you to be pitted against players using keyboard and mouse when you're using a controller. And at the same time, even though I may not personally agree with it, a PC player could definitely argue that it isn't fair for them to play against players using auto-aim when they can't. Also, PC players have a much harder time qualifying for competitive events through online qualifiers such as Solo Showdown. To put that into perspective, for the most recent solo showdown, 3 out of 50 players that finished in the top 50 were on PC, while the other 47 out of 50 were on either PS4 or Xbox. So 6% versus 94%, I think you guys can definitely see the problem with that. So let's say the Fortnite World Cup or some other future competitive event has some kind of an online qualifier. PC players certainly get the short end of the stick if the qualifier isn't platform separated. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to leave me a comment down in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the comments that Myth made about PC versus console Fortnite? Do you agree with the points he made, such as auto-aim being OP or console and PC Fortnite needing to be separated, or do you disagree and hold a different opinion? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.